The Louisiana humidity hit me like a wall as I stepped out of Angola State Penitentiary for the last time. 8 years, 2 months, and 16 days of my life stolen by a criminal justice system that failed me completely. The media circus waiting outside the gates made me squint against the camera flashes, but I kept my head high. I was innocent then, and I was innocent now. Finally proven by DNA evidence that took my attorney, Maximus Sterling, 3 years to get tested. Kane! Kane Blackheart! The reporters shouted my name like I was some kind of celebrity. In a way, I guess I was. The New Orleans man wrongfully convicted of armed robbery, finally exonerated after nearly a decade behind bars. The story had been making headlines for weeks since the Innocence Project took up my case. But I wasn't looking at the cameras. I was looking at her. Delilah stood behind the police barricade, tears streaming down her face, wearing the same blue dress she'd worn to our wedding 12 years ago. My wife. The woman who'd written me 416 letters during my imprisonment. The woman who'd visited me every month, sometimes twice when she could afford the gas money. The woman who'd kept me sane when everything else fell apart. Kane! She broke through the crowd and threw herself into my arms. Her embrace felt different somehow. She was thinner, more fragile than I remembered. I knew this day would come. I never stopped believing. The cameras ate it up. The devoted wife reunited with her wrongfully convicted husband. It would be front-page news across Louisiana, maybe even national. I held her tight, breathing in her familiar perfume, trying to remember what normal felt like. "Let's go home," I whispered in her ear. The drive through New Orleans felt surreal. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, but that happens when you've been locked in a 6x8 cell for 8 years. Delilah kept glancing at me while she drove, like she was afraid I might disappear. "I kept everything exactly as you left it," she said, her voice soft. "Your office, your clothes, everything. I couldn't bear to change anything." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. I don't know how I would have survived without your letters." Something flickered across her face. Too quick for me to read. "I just wanted you to know you weren't forgotten." Our house on Magazine Street looked exactly the same from the outside. The same green shutters, the same oak tree in the front yard that I'd been planning to trim before my whole world collapsed. But as we pulled into the driveway, I noticed a newer pickup truck parked on the street that I didn't recognize. "Whose truck is that?" I asked. "Oh, that's Vincent's. He's our neighbor. He's been incredibly helpful while you were—" She paused. "While you were away. Helping with yard work, keeping an eye on the house. He's such a good man." Inside, the house felt lived in a way that surprised me. Not dusty or abandoned like I'd expected, but comfortable. Familiar. There were small changes. A different coffee maker, some furniture I didn't recognize, a large flat-screen TV where our old one used to be. "I had to replace a few things over the years," Delilah explained, following my gaze. "The old TV died about 3 years ago, and the coffee maker broke last winter." I nodded, trying to adjust to being home. "Where are my letters?" "Your letters?" "The ones you wrote me. I kept every single one, all 416 of them. They're in my property box from the prison." Her face lit up. "Oh, those letters. They're probably in your office. I haven't touched anything in there." We walked down the hall to what used to be my home office. It looked exactly as I'd left it. My desk, my books, my computer, ancient now. Even the coffee mug I'd been drinking from the morning the police came to arrest me. But something felt off. There was no dust anywhere, like someone had been cleaning regularly, You've been keeping it clean? Vincent helped me. He said it was important to maintain things properly. There it was again. Vincent, the helpful neighbor who apparently did yard work and helped clean my house while I rotted in prison. I made a mental note to thank the man properly. I found the box of letters in my desk drawer and pulled out the first one, dated 3 days after my conviction. Delilah's handwriting, neat and careful. My dearest Kane, I know you're scared and angry, but please don't give up hope. We're going to fight this. I'm going to fight this. Every day until you come home to me. Reading it again, I felt the same surge of love and gratitude that had kept me alive during those first terrible months. These letters had been my lifeline, my connection to the world outside, my reminder that someone still believed in me. I want to organize these chronologically, I told Delilah. Maybe write a book about this whole experience. People need to know what wrongful conviction does to families. That's a wonderful idea, she said, but something in her voice sounded strained. I'll let you get settled. I need to run to the grocery store. We don't have much food in the house. After she left, I spread the letters out on my desk and began sorting them by date. The early ones were filled with shock and determination. The middle ones chronicled her struggles to pay for lawyers and appeals. The later ones spoke of hope when the Innocence Project got involved. Each one signed the same way. Forever yours, Delilah. It was therapeutic in a way, reliving our correspondence. These letters had been my anchor during the darkest period of my life. When the other inmates tried to break me, when the guards treated me like garbage, when the appeals failed one after another, I always had Delilah's words to remind me that someone out there still loved me. I was about halfway through when I noticed something odd. The letter dated March 15, 2019, had a postmark of March 27, 2019. I checked it again, thinking I'd misread. But no, the letter was clearly dated March 15th in Delilah's handwriting, but the postmark stamp showed March 22nd. A 7-day difference. Probably just a postal service delay, I thought. It happens sometimes. I continued sorting. But then I found another one. Letter dated April 3, 2019, postmarked April 11, 2019, 8 days late, and another. May 12, 2019, postmarked May 18, 2019. My hand started shaking as I checked more letters. June 14, 2019, postmarked June 23, 2019. July 8, 2019, postmarked July 20, 2019. This wasn't postal delays, this was a pattern. I grabbed a legal pad and started making a chart, checking every single letter against its postmark. What I found made my blood run cold. Out of 416 letters, only 89 had postmarks that matched their written dates. The rest were all postmarked days, sometimes weeks, after their supposed writing dates. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pattern of the postmarks. They came in clusters. 15 to 20 letters all postmarked on the same day, but supposedly written over several weeks. Like someone had written a bunch of letters at once, backdated them, then mailed them all together. My wife had been batch writing my letters. I sat there staring at the evidence, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she'd been busy with work and had to catch up sometimes. Maybe she'd written letters but forgotten to mail them immediately. There had to be an explanation. I needed to think about this rationally. I pulled out my phone, a cheap flip phone Delilah had bought me since my old smartphone was ancient history, and called information. Yes, I need the number for Dr. Zara Vex. She's a forensic document expert in Baton Rouge. I'd heard about Dr. Vex during my appeals process. She specialized in document analysis, dating, and authenticity verification. If anyone could help me understand what I was looking at, it would be her. Dr. Vex, this is Kane Blackheart. You might have heard about my case. I was just exonerated after 8 years in Angola. Mr. Blackheart, of course, congratulations on your release. How can I help you? I need someone to analyze some letters. Specifically, I need to verify writing dates versus postmark dates. There's something that doesn't add up. Certainly. Can you bring them to my office tomorrow? I should warn you, my analysis fee is $200 per hour. Money's not an issue. This is important. After I hung up, I heard the front door open. Delilah was back from the store. I quickly gathered up the letters and put them back in the box. I needed professional confirmation before I confronted her about this. How's the sorting going? She asked, carrying grocery bags into the kitchen. Good, really good. It's amazing how much these letters meant to me. I'm so glad they helped. She started putting away groceries, her back to me. You know, Vincent stopped by while I was out. He'd love to meet you properly. Maybe we could have him over for dinner this week. Sure, I said, watching her carefully. I'd like to thank him for everything he's done. That night, lying in bed next to my wife for the first time in 8 years, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those postmarks, about the helpful neighbor who'd been taking care of my house, about how comfortable and lived in everything felt. Delilah was fast asleep beside me, breathing quietly. I studied her face in the dim light from the street lamp outside. She looked older, which made sense. We'd both aged during my imprisonment. But there was something else. Something I couldn't put my finger on. The next morning, I drove to Baton Rouge with a selection of the most suspicious letters. Dr. Vex's office was in a converted Victorian house near LSU, filled with high-tech equipment and stacks of documents. Mr. Blackheart, please have a seat. Dr. Vex was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Show me what you got. I spread out 20 of the most obviously backdated letters on her examination table. These were supposed to be written weekly over several months, but look at the postmarks. She pulled on latex gloves and began examining the letters under a magnifying glass. After a few minutes, she looked up at me with a grim expression. Mr. Blackheart, I can tell you right now that these letters weren't written on the dates indicated. Do you see how the ink has the same consistency and flow patterns across multiple supposed dates? And look here, she pointed to several letters. The pen pressure and writing rhythm are identical. These were clearly written in batches. My stomach dropped. How many batches? From what I can see here, probably 5 or 6 sessions over the course of several months. Someone wrote multiple letters at once, backdated them, then mailed them in groups. Can you prove this definitively? Absolutely. I can do ink analysis, paper analysis, writing pattern analysis. But honestly, the postmark evidence you've already gathered is damning enough. This represents a systematic deception spanning multiple years. I paid her fee and drove back to New Orleans in a daze. The woman I'd loved and trusted, the woman whose letters had kept me from killing myself in prison, had been lying to me for years. But why? What possible reason could she have for backdating letters? When I got home, Delilah was in the kitchen making lunch. She smiled when she saw me, that same warm smile that had gotten me through countless dark nights in my cell. How was your drive? You were gone for a while. Just running errands, getting reacquainted with the outside world. Vincent's coming over for dinner tonight. I thought we could grill some steaks like old times. Sounds perfect. I went back to my office and continued examining the letters, this time with Dr. Vex's analysis in mind. Now that I knew what to look for, the deception was obvious. Certain phrases repeated across supposedly different weeks. The handwriting showed signs of fatigue that matched long writing sessions rather than brief weekly notes. But more disturbing was what the letters revealed about my mental state in prison. I remembered receiving these letters, remembered how they'd pulled me back from the brink multiple times. There were weeks when I'd been planning to give up, to stop fighting the appeals, maybe even to end everything. And then Delilah's letter would arrive, full of love and encouragement, and I'd find the strength to keep going. Except now I knew those letters hadn't been written when I needed them. They'd been written weeks earlier, in batches, without any knowledge of my actual mental state. The timing that had seemed so perfect, so emotionally connected, it had all been coincidence. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. I heard Delilah answer it, heard her laugh at something, heard a man's voice responding. A familiar voice, though I couldn't place it. "Kane," Delilah called. "Come meet Vincent." I walked into the living room and stopped dead. Vincent Torino was not what I'd expected. He was my age, maybe a few years older, with the kind of build that comes from regular gym work. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, looking comfortable and at home in my living room. But what really stopped me was the way he was standing. Not like a neighbor who'd stopped by for dinner. Like someone who lived here. "Kane, it's an honor to finally meet you," Vincent said, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about you over the years." His grip was firm, confident. "Delilah tells me you've been incredibly helpful while I was away. Just trying to be a good neighbor. This is such a great neighborhood, you know? Really tight-knit community. Everyone looks out for everyone else." During dinner, I watched Vincent carefully. He knew where everything was in my kitchen. He knew how Delilah liked her steak cooked. He told stories about local events that had happened during my imprisonment, and Delilah laughed at all his jokes like she'd heard them before. "So what do you do for work, Vincent?" I asked. "I'm in business development, import-export stuff. It keeps me pretty busy, but the schedule's flexible." "That's convenient. Must give you time to help around the neighborhood." "Absolutely. I've always believed in taking care of your community." After Vincent left, I helped Delilah clean up the dishes. "He seems like a good guy." "He really is. I don't know what I would have done without him while you were gone. He's been like a brother to me." Something in the way she said "brother" made my skin crawl. "How long has he lived in the neighborhood?" "Oh, about 7 years now. He moved in maybe a year after—" She paused. "After you were convicted." "Where does he live exactly?" "Just down the street. The blue house with the white trim." I knew that house. When I'd been arrested, it had belonged to an elderly couple named the Hendersons. They'd been in their 80s then, so it made sense they might have moved or passed away. That night, after Delilah fell asleep, I snuck out of the house and walked down the street to the blue house. It was dark, but I could see Vincent's pickup truck in the driveway. I walked around the backyard, staying in the shadows. The house was dark except for one room on the second floor. Through the window, I could see Vincent moving around what looked like a bedroom. But something was off. The room looked lived in, but temporary. Like someone was camping there rather than actually living there. I was about to head home when I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a light on in my house, in my bedroom, where Delilah should have been sleeping. I crept back home and slipped in through the back door. The bedroom light was off now, and Delilah appeared to be asleep. But when I got into bed, the sheets on her side were cold, like she hadn't been there for a while. The next morning, I called a private investigator named Sable Cross. She'd been recommended by my attorney, Maximus Sterling, as someone who specialized in domestic investigations. Ms. Cross, I need surveillance on my wife and a man named Vincent Torino. I think they might be having an affair. Mr. Blackheart, I know your case. Are you sure you want to go down this road so soon after your release? I'm sure. I need to know the truth. My fee is $75 an hour plus expenses. How long do you want me to watch them? As long as it takes. 3 days later, Sable called me with her preliminary findings. Mr. Blackheart, you need to sit down for this. Vincent Torino isn't just having an affair with your wife, he's been living in your house for the past 7 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean, living in my house? I mean, he's been paying the utilities, receiving mail there, using it as his primary residence. The blue house down the street? He rents that as a front, but he doesn't actually live there. He lives with your wife. I felt like I was going to be sick. Are you certain? I have photos, utility records, mail delivery confirmations. This isn't just an affair, Mr. Blackheart. This is identity theft. Vincent Torino has been living your life while you've been in prison. Can you find out more about his background? I'm already on it. And Mr. Blackheart? There's something else. Vincent Torino has a criminal record. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. He's a career criminal. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the box of letters. Everything made sense now. The batch writing, the postmarks, the way Vincent seemed so comfortable in my house. My wife hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been living with a criminal who was systematically stealing my identity. But I needed more proof. I needed to understand the full scope of what they'd done. I called my attorney, Maximus Sterling. Maximus, I need your help with something. I think my wife and her boyfriend have been committing fraud using my identity while I was in prison. That's a serious allegation, Kane. What kind of fraud? I don't know yet, but I need to find out. Can you help me access my credit reports, bank records, anything that might show what they've been doing? Absolutely. Identity theft of an incarcerated person is a federal crime. If they've been using your social security number or opening accounts in your name, we can prosecute. 3 hours later, Maximus called me back. His voice was grim. Kane, we need to meet immediately. What they've done to you goes way beyond adultery. This is organized crime. We met at his office that afternoon. Maximus had spread documents across his conference table like he was preparing for war. Let's start with your house, he said. Did you know that Vincent Torino refinanced your mortgage 3 times while you were in prison? That's impossible. I never signed anything. He forged your signature, used a fake power of attorney document that Delilah notarized herself. She's a notary public through her insurance company, so she had access to the stamp and seals. I stared at the refinancing documents. My signature looked perfect, but I'd never seen these papers before in my life. How much did they steal? From the refinancing alone? About $180,000. But that's just the beginning. He pulled out another stack of papers. They've opened 17 credit cards in your name, 3 business lines of credit. They started a company called Blackheart Insurance Consulting and got a $75,000 small business loan. A company? Vincent's been running it for 6 years. They use your social security number, your identity, your credit history. On paper, you're a successful businessman who's been operating this company the entire time you were in prison. The room started spinning. What about my wrongful conviction settlement? The state of Louisiana awarded me $250,000 for my exoneration. Maximus's face darkened. That's the worst part. Delilah changed your address with the state to a P.O. box she controls. She opened a bank account in the name Cain L. Blackheart, close enough to your name to fool the bureaucracy, but technically belonging to someone else. She's been intercepting your mail and your compensation. How much? All of it. The entire $250,000 was deposited into accounts she controls. Plus, she filed for life insurance benefits, claiming you died in prison. I couldn't breathe. Life insurance? She had a policy on you through her employer. When you were convicted, she started telling people you died. Filed a claim 2 years ago for $340,000. But I was alive. I was writing letters to the insurance company during my appeals. Letters that never reached them because she was intercepting your mail. Cain, your wife, and Vincent Torino have stolen close to $1 million using your identity. This isn't just adultery or fraud. This is racketeering. I spent the next week working with Maximus to document everything. The scope of the fraud was staggering. While I'd been fighting for my freedom, Delilah and Vincent had been systematically stealing my entire life. They'd used my identity to buy a boat, 2 cars, and a vacation home in Florida. They'd opened investment accounts, gotten business credit cards, even applied for professional licenses in my name. Vincent had been living as Cain Blackheart while I rotted in Angola State Penitentiary, but the worst part was still the letters. Dr. Vex's full analysis revealed that my correspondence had been part of a calculated psychological manipulation. The letters were timed to arrive whenever I seemed to be losing hope, but not because Delilah was responding to my emotional state. She'd simply written enough letters to cover any possible scenario, backdated them, and mailed them in batches. The letters that had saved my life, that had kept me from suicide during the darkest moments of my wrongful imprisonment, had been written by a woman who was living with another man and stealing everything I owned. "We need to contact the FBI," Maximus said. "This is federal mail fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. These people need to go to prison." "No," I said. "Not yet." "Cain, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I spent 8 years learning how to be patient, how to plan, how to wait for the right moment to strike." I looked at him across his desk. "They destroyed my life while I was helpless to stop them. Now it's my turn." "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to destroy them the same way they destroyed me. Systematically, completely. I want them to lose everything just like I did." Maximus looked uncomfortable. "Cain, I understand you're angry, but revenge isn't the answer. We should focus on getting your money back and putting them in prison." "That's exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to do it my way." Over the next few weeks, I began my own investigation. I used the skills I'd learned in prison: how to gather information, how to be invisible, how to plan long-term operations. I'd spent 8 years surrounded by criminals, learning how they thought, how they operated. Now I was going to use that education. Vincent Torino wasn't just a career criminal. He was a predator who specialized in vulnerable women. Sable Cross's investigation revealed that he'd done this before. 3 times, in fact. He would find women whose husbands were deployed overseas or in prison, seduce them, move into their homes, and systematically steal their identities and assets. His first victim had been a military wife whose husband was deployed in Afghanistan. Vincent had convinced her that her husband had been killed in action, helped her file for death benefits, then disappeared with over $200,000. His second victim was an elderly widow whose son was in federal prison for tax evasion. Vincent had posed as a paralegal helping with the appeal, moved into her house as a boarder, then transferred her house and savings into his name before she died. Delilah was victim number 3, except she'd become a willing partner rather than just a mark. "He's good at what he does," Sable reported. "He targets women who are emotionally vulnerable and isolated. He provides comfort and support, then gradually takes over their finances and identities." What about his real background? Vincent Torino isn't even his real name. He's actually Vincent Torelli, originally from New Jersey. He's got convictions for fraud, forgery, and identity theft going back 15 years. He's been using different names and social security numbers for most of his adult life. I learned that Vincent had been planning to disappear soon. He'd already started moving money to offshore accounts and establishing a new identity. My exoneration had accelerated his timeline. He'd expected to have another 7 years to complete his operation. But here's the interesting part, Sable continued. He's made a critical mistake. All of the accounts and properties are still in your name. He never transferred ownership to himself, probably because he was planning to disappear anyway. That means everything he's stolen is legally yours. Even the money they've spent? Even that. If we can prove they obtained it through identity theft, you can recover damages for the full amount, plus interest and penalties. I smiled for the first time since discovering the truth. What about criminal charges? Mail fraud alone carries a 20-year sentence. Add in identity theft, wire fraud, and racketeering, and they're looking at life in prison. That evening, I sat in my office organizing the evidence we'd gathered. I had documentation of the mail fraud, the identity theft, the insurance fraud, the mortgage fraud, the business fraud, everything. It was an airtight case that would destroy both of them. Delilah came in around 10 o'clock, wearing a nightgown I didn't recognize. "Working late again?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "Just organizing some paperwork. You know how it is after being away for so long." She leaned over and kissed me softly. "I'm so proud of you for getting through all of this. You're the strongest man I've ever known." I looked up at her, this woman who'd tortured me for 8 years while pretending to love me, and felt nothing but cold anger. "Thank you for never giving up on me," I said. "Your letters saved my life. I just wanted you to know you weren't alone. I never forgot that. Every letter, every word, they're all burned into my memory." Something flickered in her eyes, but she quickly looked away. "I should let you get back to work." The next morning, I called Maximus and told him it was time to move. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready for 8 years. Once we file the federal charges, there's no going back. Their lives will be destroyed." "Good." The FBI raid happened on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I heard the vehicles pull up outside. Through the window, I watched armed agents surround the house. Delilah came running downstairs in her nightgown, panic in her eyes. "Kane, what's happening?" "I think we're about to find out." The front door exploded open and agents flooded into the house. "FBI, everyone on the ground." "Mrs. Delilah Blackheart, you're under arrest for mail fraud, identity theft, and racketeering." Agent Phoenix Reeves held up her badge as other agents forced Delilah to the floor. "Mr. Blackheart, please step away from your wife." I raised my hands and backed away, watching as they handcuffed the woman who'd destroyed my life. Her eyes met mine across the room, and I saw the exact moment she realized I knew everything. "You did this," she whispered. Yes, I said simply. I did. They arrested Vincent at the same time at his rented house down the street. The news crews were there within an hour. The same crews that had covered my exoneration now covering my wife's arrest. The irony wasn't lost on me. The federal charges were extensive. Delilah and Vincent were each charged with mail fraud, 47 counts, wire fraud, 23 counts, identity theft, 18 counts, aggravated identity theft, 8 counts, money laundering, 12 counts, racketeering conspiracy, 1 count, insurance fraud, 3 counts. The prosecution estimated they were looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. But I wasn't done. 3 days after their arrest, I filed a civil lawsuit against both of them for $12 million in compensatory and punitive damages. Maximus had assembled a team of the best civil litigation attorneys in Louisiana. "We're going to take everything they have," he told me. "Every asset, every account, every piece of property they've touched. When we're done, they'll have nothing left." The media attention was incredible. The wrongfully convicted man whose wife stole his life while he was in prison. It was the kind of story that captured national attention. I was invited to appear on news shows, documentaries, and podcasts. Everyone wanted to hear how I'd uncovered the deception. I told them about the letters, about the postmarks, about the systematic fraud that had been going on for years while I fought for my freedom. But I didn't tell them about the revenge. That part was mine. 6 months later, both Delilah and Vincent pled guilty to avoid trial. The evidence was overwhelming, and their attorneys knew they had no defense. Vincent got 25 years in federal prison under the Career Criminal Enhancement. His history of similar crimes convinced the judge to impose the maximum sentence. Delilah got 18 years. Her lack of a criminal record saved her from a longer sentence, but the judge made it clear that her betrayal of a wrongfully convicted husband was particularly heinous. "Mrs. Blackheart," Judge Cordelia Blackwood said during sentencing, "you took a man who was already suffering the worst injustice our legal system can inflict, and you tortured him further for your own gain. Your actions represent a level of cruelty that demands severe punishment." The civil trial took another 8 months, but the outcome was never in doubt. The jury awarded me $8.7 million in compensatory damages and $12 million in punitive damages. It was one of the largest personal injury awards in Louisiana history. More importantly, I recovered everything they'd stolen. The house, the businesses, the offshore accounts, the life insurance money, my wrongful conviction settlement. All of it came back to me, plus interest and penalties. But money wasn't what I really wanted. What I wanted was to see them lose everything, the way I had. Vincent's ex-wife, Serafina, contacted me during the civil trial. She'd been following the case in the news and wanted to tell me about Vincent's previous victims. "He destroyed my life too," she said over coffee in a New Orleans cafe. "He convinced me that my first husband had been cheating on me, helped me divorce him, then stole everything we'd built together. I lost my house, my savings, my business. It took me 10 years to rebuild. Why didn't you press charges?" He was smart about it. Never left enough evidence for criminal charges. But he made a mistake with you and your wife. He got greedy. What do you mean? The other victims were just marks. But with Delilah, he fell in love. Or his version of love anyway. That's why he stayed so long, why he took so many risks. He thought they could run off together and live happily ever after on your money. The truth was even more satisfying than I'd imagined. Vincent hadn't just been using Delilah. He genuinely cared about her. which meant losing her to federal prison was destroying him emotionally as well as legally. 3 years after their conviction, I received a letter from Delilah in federal prison. The irony of receiving prison mail from the woman who'd sent me fraudulent prison mail wasn't lost on me. Kane, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go so far. Vincent convinced me that you would never get out, that your appeals would fail, that I needed to move on with my life. By the time I realized what we were doing was wrong, I was in too deep to stop. I read the letter once, then burned it. I'd kept copies of all her false letters as evidence, but I had no interest in her real ones. Vincent died in federal prison 2 years into his sentence. Another inmate killed him during a fight in the exercise yard. The news reached me through my attorney, who thought I should know. I felt nothing when I heard. Vincent Torino, or Torelli, or whatever his real name was, had died the way he'd lived, violently and without honor. His death closed that chapter of my story permanently. With the money I'd recovered, I built an empire. I started with a security consulting firm, using my prison experience to help businesses protect themselves from internal fraud. The irony of a wrongfully convicted man becoming an expert on criminal behavior wasn't lost on my clients. It was exactly why they hired me. I partnered with the Innocence Project to help other wrongfully convicted people navigate the financial and legal challenges of exoneration. Too many innocent people were released from prison only to discover that their families had stolen everything while they were gone. I wrote a book about my experience called The False Letters, A Wrongful Conviction Betrayal. It became a bestseller and was optioned for a movie. The documentary about my case won an Academy Award. I went to law school at Tulane, graduating magna cum laude with a specialization in wrongful conviction law. I used my legal education to help reform the criminal justice system that had failed me so completely. 5 years after my exoneration, I met Sarah Martinez at a legal conference. She was an attorney who specialized in victims' rights, and she'd been following my case for years. We were both cautious about relationships. She'd been through a difficult divorce, and I had obvious trust issues. But Sarah was different. She understood justice, she understood betrayal, and she understood the long process of rebuilding after someone destroys your life. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and I had her investigated by 3 different private investigators before I asked her to marry me. "I don't blame you for being careful," she said when I told her about the background checks. "After what you've been through, I'd be suspicious if you weren't paranoid." Our wedding was small and private, attended only by people who'd proven their loyalty over years of friendship. Maximus Sterling was my best man. Sable Cross was Sarah's maid of honor. The officiant was Father Magnus, the prison chaplain who'd witnessed my darkest moments and my eventual triumph. Delilah was still in federal prison, serving year 7 of her 18-year sentence. She'd been denied parole twice and wouldn't be eligible again for 3 more years. I heard from other attorneys that she'd tried to appeal her conviction multiple times, claiming she'd been manipulated by Vincent, but every appeal had been rejected. I never visited her. I never wrote to her. I never responded to any of her letters. As far as I was concerned, Delilah Blackheart had died the day I discovered the truth about those letters. On my 10th wedding anniversary with Sarah, we established the Kane Blackheart Foundation for Wrongful Conviction Victims. The foundation provides financial assistance, legal support, and counseling for people who've been exonerated after years of wrongful imprisonment. Our first client was a man named Marcus Washington who'd served 12 years for a rape he didn't commit. Like me, he'd discovered that his girlfriend had been stealing his identity while he was in prison. Unlike me, he didn't have the resources to fight back. She took everything, he told me during our first meeting. My house, my car, my savings, even my dog. I spent 12 years dreaming about coming home to her, and she'd been living with another man the whole time. What do you want to do about it? I asked. I want justice, but I don't know how to get it. I do. We helped Marcus recover $340,000 in stolen assets and sent his ex-girlfriend to federal prison for identity theft and fraud. It was deeply satisfying to use my experience to help someone else get the justice they deserved. The foundation grew rapidly. Within 3 years, we were handling over 100 cases per year, recovering millions of dollars in stolen assets and sending dozens of financial predators to prison. I'd turned my own victimization into a weapon against the people who prey on the wrongfully convicted. Sarah and I never had children. We were both too focused on our work, and my trust issues made the idea of being responsible for someone else's entire life terrifying. But we mentored dozens of young attorneys and helped hundreds of victims rebuild their lives. On the 15th anniversary of my exoneration, I received a call from the warden at the federal women's prison where Delilah was incarcerated. Mr. Blackheart, I'm calling to inform you that Delilah Blackheart passed away this morning. She had a heart attack during exercise period. I thanked him for the call and hung up. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee, and she looked at me with concern. Everything all right? Delilah died. Sarah set down her coffee mug and came over to hug me. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Relieved. Like the last chapter of that story is finally finished. Are you going to the funeral? She doesn't get a funeral from me. She lost that right when she decided to torture me for 8 years. Delilah had died alone in federal prison, just like Vincent had. Neither of them had any family left who cared enough to claim their bodies. They'd burned every bridge, betrayed every relationship, destroyed every connection they'd had with the normal world. That evening, I went into my office and pulled out the box of false letters. I'd kept them all these years as evidence, but also as a reminder. A reminder of how completely someone can betray you. A reminder of how important it is to verify trust before giving it. I built a fire in the fireplace and began feeding the letters into the flames, one by one. Each letter represented a lie, a manipulation, a moment when I'd been deceived by someone I loved. Watching them burn was cathartic, but I kept one letter. The last one Delilah had sent me before my exoneration. The one where she'd written, I can't wait to see you again. Everything will be perfect when you come home. We'll have the life we always dreamed of. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, next to my law degree and the newspaper clipping from the day of my exoneration, not as a reminder of her love, but as a reminder of her deception. A reminder that even the people closest to you can destroy you if you're not careful. Sarah found me there an hour later, staring at the fire as the last of the letters burned to ash. Any regrets? She asked. I thought about it carefully. No. They got exactly what they deserved. Vincent died violently in prison, just like he deserved. Delilah died alone and forgotten, just like she deserved. And I built an empire from the ashes of their betrayal. What about forgiveness? Forgiveness is for people who are sorry for what they've done. They were only sorry they got caught. I stood up and put my arm around my wife. Some betrayals are too complete for forgiveness. Some people deserve to be destroyed. 20 years after my exoneration, I was giving a speech at a law school graduation when a young woman approached me afterward. "Mr. Blackheart, my name is Jessica Hill. I'm a first-year law student and I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "My father was wrongfully convicted when I was 10 years old. He spent 8 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. When he was finally exonerated, we discovered that my mother had been stealing his identity and living with another man, just like what happened to you. I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be sorry. Your foundation helped us recover everything she'd stolen and sent her to prison. My father was able to rebuild his life because of your work. He's a successful contractor now, and I'm going to be a lawyer because of what you showed us was possible." "What happened to your mother?" "She died in prison 3 years ago. Heart attack, just like your ex-wife." Jessica's voice was matter-of-fact, without any sadness. "Some people choose to become monsters. When they do, they deserve to face the consequences." I smiled at her. "What kind of law do you want to practice?" "Wrongful conviction cases. I want to help people get the justice they deserve, just like you did." "If you're serious about that, come see me when you graduate. The foundation is always looking for attorneys who understand what real justice means." That night, I told Sarah about my conversation with Jessica. "It's amazing how your story keeps inspiring people," she said. 20 years later, and you're still helping people get their lives back." "The best revenge is a life well lived," I said. "But sometimes the best revenge is also making sure the people who wronged you pay for what they've done." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd forgiven them instead?" "No. Forgiveness would have meant they got away with it. Other people would have been victimized. Vincent would have found new marks. Delilah would have kept stealing from me. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about protection. By destroying them, I protected everyone else they might have hurt. And you built something good from something terrible. That's the only way to win against people like that. You don't just beat them. You become so successful that their betrayal becomes the foundation of your triumph." Looking back now, I can see that my 8 years in prison weren't wasted time. They were preparation. They taught me patience, strategy, and how to survive in a world where people will destroy you if you let them. They taught me that trust must be earned, that love must be verified, and that justice sometimes requires taking matters into your own hands. Delilah's letters didn't save my life. My determination to get revenge for those letters saved my life. The moment I discovered her deception, I found a purpose that sustained me through everything that followed. I didn't just survive her betrayal, I used it to build something better than anything I'd ever imagined. The false letters had been meant to control me, to keep me docile and grateful while she stole everything I owned. Instead, they became the evidence that destroyed her completely and gave me the motivation to rebuild my life into something extraordinary. Every lie she told made me stronger. Every false word of love became fuel for my success. Every backdated letter became another year of her prison sentence. In the end, Delilah Blackheart got exactly what she deserved. And so did I.